humanities. But to be honest with you, I have never attended any protests. I just didn't have such ideas, and I also had something to apply my efforts to. But to come out for the famous 25 seconds and raise a poster with the slogan, "Let me go to Israel," that seemed a bit boyish to me.
I moved to Moscow in 1972 and had already attended a few protests at the Central Telegraph and at the Supreme Soviet. A group of people would come, for example, 50-60 people. They would sit down at the Central Telegraph and write some letter to the Supreme Soviet, for example. And then it would be sent as a telegram to the Supreme Soviet or somewhere else and to the West, and the letter said, "We, the undersigned, have come to the Central Telegraph and we will stay here for the whole day until it closes as a sign of protest against not being permitted to immigrate to Israel." The next day they would repeat the same thing, and that's when the authorities realized they need to react. So on the third day, or maybe on the second day, they bring us a bus, make everyone get on that bus and take us somewhere about 25 kilometers from Moscow, beyond the Moscow Ring Road. Then they make everyone get off the bus, saying, "You can figure out on your own how to get back." The next day we would come again. They don't wait for the evening this time. Somewhere in the middle of the day, they bring the buses, make people get on them, and take us somewhere more than 50 kilometers from Moscow. Someone said something to them. "Come on, there are children here, and you're just throwing us out in the woods. How will we make it to Moscow?" So the police beat up a few people. They threw them into the water. The water was covered with a thick crust of ice. They threw them there and basically trampled them. That was already grounds enough to hold a more powerful demonstration of protest. And we went to the Supreme Soviet. Although later people went to Red Square too, chaining themselves to those railings of St. Basil Cathedral. There was a cascade protest. Every day a certain number of people came out, they were detained, some were let go, some were incarcerated, and the next day another group came out. And this would happen a few days in a row.
On Mother and Child Day, we decided to organize a protest in 5 different locations, to lock ourselves in apartments and hang the slogan from the window. I wrote a poster, pinned it to my skis, and set it out on my balcony.
There was no freedom of immigration. There was the institution of prisoners of Zion and of refuseniks. All of them had their lives and freedom threatened. This must have intimidated the others. But in order to lower the fever in the West, they had to let someone go once in a while.
This is what the investigations officer at my prison camp told me after reading my case. I thought the KGB was good, but I would have done a better job planting the drugs on you. You would have never have weaseled your way out. And they would have come here, showed you the box of narcotics, and that's it. Do you think you are so smart and educated that you can tell us we can't detain you for so many hours, that there is no law forbidding to teach Hebrew? Have you read too many books? We can have it easily arranged. You'll come, open the box, see the drugs, they're yours, and you're going in for as many years as we say.
It was in prison camp number 35 during Hanukkah. I was explaining the meaning of this holiday, the holiday of freedom, to a few other prisoners. The story of how a small group of Jews defeated a huge army that tried to take their freedom away. And in prison camp, this drew quite a lot of enthusiasm. And one of the inmates even made a wooden Hanukkah menorah. And the next day they confiscated it from me. This is not a synagogue for you. I had nothing else to do. I had to go on a hunger strike. But they were expecting some sort of a committee, as it turned out. So a few days later he calls me in and starts trying to talk me into stopping this hunger strike, and promises me peace and friendship and so on. I tell him, "Give me back my Hanukkah menorah." He says, "No, it's been confiscated." I say, "Look, today is the last day of Hanukkah. It's very important for me. If you don't want me to go back to the barracks to celebrate, let's do it here. Let's light the candles together and celebrate, you and I." He says, "Will it be quick?" And I say, "Of course, sure, we'll light the candles, I'll say a short prayer, and you have to say Amen. And that's it, it will be over."
Свечи, я скажу короткую молитву, ты должен сказать «Амен», и все, и на этом кончится.
He calls Gavriluk, "Bring that candelabra quick." And I say, sorry, but you have to put on a hat, because I will recite a bracha, a prayer. He put on his sheepskin hat, and I put on my inmate's cap, and I recited a prayer asking for strength to live through this and to reach the land of Israel, and that there will come a day when we will celebrate this holiday, lighting the Hanukkah candles in Jerusalem, and all our animals will hear our prayers and will say Amen. I make a gesture to Osin, like we agreed. He says, Amen. I greatly enjoyed that. And then I stopped my hunger strike.
Natan Sharansky was exchanged in 1986 after multiple protests all over the world and petitions from the most influential politicians of Europe and the US, as a result of a special agreement between the USSR and the US. The exchange also included 2 citizens of West Germany, a citizen of Czechoslovakia. They were exchanged for a few Soviet spies arrested in Europe, and the problem of refuseniks was later resolved at the highest level.
We went to Moscow, and what happened was, as I say, it was an arms control meeting, but when we got there, I was Assistant Secretary for Human Rights, and when I began to talk about immigration, he said, the best thing to do is to go to the OVR. He said, we're not talking to you about that. That's none of your business. And I had a list there of names of refuseniks. I wanted to give it to them, didn't take it. Then either that day or the next day I was back at the Foreign Ministry talking to Anatoly. And then I said, you know, when I get back home, I will have to give a report to Secretary Schultz. And I know he will be unhappy with that. And as a matter of fact, next month, when Foreign Minister Shevardnadze is going to be in Washington, undoubtedly, Schultz is going to raise this question with him. The next day, I was at the airport, took me to the VIP lounge, got me a cup of tea, and then he said, that list that they didn't want to take at the OVR, give it to me. The next month, a lot of the people on my list were called, given their exit permits.
The Jewish movement has enriched the English language by giving it the word refusenik, for example. After perestroika, the problem of refuseniks no longer existed. Today, there are quite a few Jewish organizations operating in Russia, and immigration is not a problem. This was Parallels Events People at Voice of America, and I'm your host, Natalia Baltyanskaya.
VOA presents the following National Geographic program as we continue to explore the world around us.
65 expeditions and by 100 years old. This is what I've called the polar bear fang, and I've been trying to get to this tower for 10 years. We're going to start off by going up to eastern Greenland, which for today's day and age, eastern Greenland is one of the most unexplored places on the planet. And so there are places that literally no one's explored, no one's been to, and still finding places with huge vertical granite walls to make first ascents on. The places I'm going to, if you go to them on Google Earth and you kind of go down to the street view, there's nothing there. For example, on the image on the right is a high-resolution 150 megabyte satellite image. And if you look in this area, there's a little bit of evidence here because there's this big shadow, and it looks like there could be this big tower. And if you look at this guy on the left, it's just a hill. But according to some of my research and talking to some of the Greenlandic Inuit, this right here, this left area, this is what actually exists in this same view from Google Earth. This beautiful, huge, wonderful, for a climber, this is as good as it gets as far as unclimbed, untouched. This is what I've called the polar bear fang, and I've been trying to get to this tower for 10 years and been denied on 3 expeditions, which brings us to my most recent expedition I got back about 7 weeks ago. The left view is 2014. The right view is 2015. The difference? All the black ocean on the right side, it's all sea ice that's come down from the north. So when we're flying into Greenland this year, this is what the sea ice look like. This is very, very difficult to take a boat through, especially a small fishing boat. And we're supposed to meet one of the most experienced guys in eastern Greenland to take me about 400 miles to the fjords that I want to climb in. Siggy. He's got a huge reputation on the east coast of Greenland being able to basically survive any conditions. Well, all of that ice that you just saw there flying into the east coast, he was coming to pick me up and he got stuck in the ice crushed his boat and the boat sank. And so fortunately everyone was safe. The Danish military were able to get them by helicopter, and we're waiting on the east coast of Greenland for him to pick us up, but he never arrived. It's a pretty intense situation. I'm thinking, okay, this is the 4th expedition that I'm going to be denied going to this area that I've been wanting to get to 400 miles away. We found a new boat. We found a friend of a friend who was willing to take us down. They had to bring 2 boats to bring enough fuel to get down there and back. And they had this great cat on the boat, which is always kind of fun. But this was a unique trip because I'd planned to go solo. And my younger brother said, hey, I'd love to go on this trip. And I was like, we're going to do this huge climb. He's not a climber, but he was going to go along anyways and see what happened. It was really cool to go with him because I do a lot of expeditions with people that don't have very much experience, and it's really exciting to live through their enthusiasm. But Andy is not a climber, and I thought, okay, I can just teach you what to do. You can follow me up this climb. We'll go on the belief of blood and brothers, and we'll communicate, and it'll work out. So we got close. We're 380 miles, and the boat breaks down. I'm like, great, we're just not going to make it. 4 expeditions, years, a decade of trying to get to this place and climb this tower, and this is Bent. He's the captain of the boat. The boat broke down. He went and sat down, filled his pipe, smoked some tobacco, and took his engine apart. 8 hours later, we continued on. He didn't have any worries about it. Finally, this little narrow fjord was filled with ice, and he just kind of pushed right through. It took about 2 hours to kind of nudge the ice, slowly nudge the ice, kind of ramp up on the ice. And so finally, we got through, and then we could see, okay, we're going to be able to make it to where I want to go. It was a pretty exciting moment. This is a view from the ocean of the polar bear fang. And again, if there's any climbers in the audience, for an unclimbed tower, unknown, that's pretty special. We'd been delayed now almost 17 days because Siggy's boat sank. And so we've got, a little over 10 days to climb this tower and get out of there. And it's pretty far away. There's polar bears here. The previous year, they sighted 11 polar bears in this area. And when we got near this area, we saw a big polar bear eating a seal. So it's a pretty dangerous spot. The easiest way to be safe is to sleep up high on a ledge. You can see our base camp down below. But immediately the next day after getting dropped off, made a beautiful base camp, packed up our bags, and started shuttling loads. That's the first view that we got of the polar bear fang from camp because there were some big cliffs in front of us. And so at this point, we're getting up there and we're starting to have to cross glaciers. I'm teaching my brother how to tie into a rope And how do you tie a figure-8 knot again? And this is our high camp. And I think this is another reason of why. Why do you go? Because it's just so beautiful. I mean, it's just so incredible out there. And, when you're in a place that no one's ever been to before, it really, that feeling of exploration, it increases the probability of that addiction to continue. You can't wait to get out there. So this is our high camp. And the fountain of youth, I think it exists in Greenland because you're just drinking this water. You drink it and you feel like, wow, this is pure. This is real life. This is nature. And it's just moments like that keep you getting back out there. From that high camp, we still got about half a mile to the base of the wall. We slept at the base of the wall, and we started climbing. It got really serious because my brother is not a climber. And so he's on ascenders, he's on Jumars following me up the rope. We climbed 17 pitches to get to the top of this tower. We had to do 2 open bivvies. And a lot of the times we had fun, but a lot of times I'm like, listen, you got to do this, this, and this. And when I'm leading pitches, I'm putting directionals in for the rope to run a certain way so he doesn't pull off a rock and kill himself. And, it was real deal up there. And we put the cameras away, and I'm like, we've got to focus on safety. There were 3 different times I had to switch routes because it was just too loose and dangerous. There were 2 times where I talked to him about it and said, we might have to bail. It might be too dangerous. And honestly, my mom, she would kill me if something happened to the baby brother, to the youngest. This is the same tower, the polar bear fang. And what's really interesting about this is how the mountains change when you're in the mountains. This is about a half-mile distance of walking from one side to the other. And from one view, we're thinking, oh, wow, we can just cruise over these glaciers and walk up this wall and look at this sweet route and just climb right up, no worries. Well, once we got to our high camp, we realized we have to drop down another 2,000 feet, cross another half-mile glacier that is riddled with crevasses, and then start up the route and find our way. So it looked like, oh, that's not going to be too bad. Once we got up there, this always happens, by the way. The mountains change and change and change. So we had an open bivvy. We continued to the top of the wall, and we actually bivvied right on top. We got there about 2 in the morning, so we pushed about 48 hours, and we were climbing really slow. If I'd had an experienced partner, we would have went really fast, but again, it was every move, every focus, every detail. I'm not going to kill my brother. And this is, it's kind of funny, but it really is why we succeeded with the patience, with the slow is fast mentality, with the communication, because we're pulling off, huge rocks and causing thousands of pounds of crashing kilonewton pressure. I mean, it was pretty spicy, but it's just a big shout out to my brother for the trust he had in me up there. It was pretty exciting to stand on top of the polar bear fang after a decade of wanting to be up there.
Yeah, you're the ram. Woo! First ascent here in Greenland. Oh, now we got to figure out how to get down. Time is now. Life is sweet. Talk to you soon.
He was a good sport to wear the Year of the Ram mask, and but the summit is pretty powerful. And again, or when you get up there, a lot of people, oh, you're halfway. There's some truth to that because you have to get back down, but you made the summit. We're on the summit. I mean, there is an incredible feeling about standing on a summit in a fjord, an area that's unexplored, a climb that's, a new climb, a first ascent. It's really a powerful feeling. And to share it with my brother, we're very close. We always have been. It was such a magical moment to be up there with him, and it was just incredible.
VOA, exploring the world around us.
So this is actually a structure which has now 2 sets of muscle rings and 1 backbone.
These structures are tiny biological robots, or biobots, and they move a bit like inchworms.
What you see here is a real-time video of one of these biobots that are about 8 to 10 millimeters long.
With support from the National Science Foundation, bioengineer Rashid Bashir and his team at the University of Illinois are building these biobots inspired by the many different ways